Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Higher Practice Podcast. Will and I have been on a long hiatus from the podcast. It's 6 to 9 months now since we've really been in the seat of interviews and having good conversations on here. And we've been really focused on a pretty exciting program, the psychedelic assisted therapy program that we are now ending our first cohort that started almost a year ago. So it's been quite a journey to really, develop a program that we felt was really needed in the space as we're moving into this new frontier in psychotherapy, bringing psychedelic therapy more mainstream. So very exciting. Anything you want to add to that, Will, before we kind of get into what we're doing today?
Just reflecting on what we've been doing the last, I'd say 9 months, has been a huge shift in our attention toward developing a substantial team to run a much bigger program than we've ever run before, and also collaborating with MAPS to deliver MDMA assisted therapy training inside of this training that we launched. So it's been it's taken a lot of attention for us to support our team to grow and develop their own leadership. And it's kind of a new phase for us to be in an oversight position and kind of getting to a point where we're empowering our amazing team members to take more on and grow and lead in their own way.
Yeah. And of course, our minds don't stop churning about what we wanted to be talking about on the podcast this whole time. We're still having those conversations, and which kind of leads into what I think we discussed, we wanted to talk about today, which is about inspiration and how to stay inspired in the busyness of life and being in the world. And so the launching point here is inspiration and how to live an inspired day. I think an inspired life is a more it's a big goal, but I think if we bring it down to just today, it's a little more tangible and practical. And so that's what you and I work on every day together, is staying inspired and helping our team stay inspired, and students. And inspiration is a big part of the way we think, right?
Absolutely. It's such an important part of mental well-being and optimization and just quality of life, to live a life that feels fulfilling and enjoyable and aligned with who we actually are deep inside.
Yeah. And it almost seems like if we start with just this framework of mental health as just a kind of entry, right? Mental well-being, whatever that is. But if we start there, inspiration seems like it's almost a result of mental well-being. Would you agree with that? It's sort of like a function.
I think it's sort of what I'm learning in the last few months is that it's a result, but it also feels like there's a responsibility. I've learned this a lot from my wife, Krista. There's a responsibility to generate inspiration through determined, committed practices. In my life over the years, I've thought of result as something that just sort of automatically happens through effort, but it's I'm learning a lot more about how practices and commitments and discipline and going to, for example, self-exploration and journaling, or making commitments for my day and practicing those things every day is like, it really does change what the quality of that day is for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's more, I like that. It's more of a function of, it's like a function you have to sort of turn on
Mhm.
inside the mental sphere. Because it doesn't just turn on by itself. Sometimes it does, but it actually takes like tending to the garden
Yeah.
to get that function operating well, and really living in that space. So why don't we start with how to what's the fuel that inspiration needs in order to come alive in
Yeah.
a day, right? Just in a normal day, and then how do we keep turning it back on through the day, and
Mm.
when it turns off, because it will. Why don't you start with some ways that you turn inspiration on?
Well, since um, I'm going to start with the basic level for me, because it starts there in my experiences. I was working on trying to balance my blood sugar for really a couple years through diet mainly, because I've always been, pretty active with cardio, riding a bike regularly. But I came to find out that what I was doing with my diet was the opposite of what I needed, and made a big change in January. Started lifting weights, went back to a more of a paleo diet, and got out of keto, went back to paleo, and pretty soon noticed a huge shift in my physiology. And it just blew me away because the access to this inspiration experience was so much easier for me. There was less stress and anxiety in my body, sleeping better. So on the physiologic level, I think it's creating like you were saying about tending the garden, it's like creating the environment where inspiration is more available. And then I'll speak later about practices, but that for me was like a real turning point to find more access to the state of inspiration.
Yeah, so the energy source that you put into your body, and then learning about what works for your own body in terms of optimizing that energy. I mean, I think it's still underrated in terms of how much of an impact nutrition has on ourselves and our bodies and our brains, and this concept of inspiration. Some people are onto that and like are clued in. Like my wife has been clued into that the day I met her, 15, when she was like 18, she was already clued in to that. I wasn't. When I was 18, I was still hitting McDonald's pretty hard and living off of it. And not that it's like a bad thing if you're still doing that out there in the world, but it's just, I just didn't realize the connection at all.
Yeah.
You saw my episode of Sour Patch Kids once. That was like that was like an every other day thing for me. So nutrition is key.
Yeah.
And for me, in the last year, I moved my exercise routine to like 5:30, 6 a.m. And that was big. I was never like a morning person, so I always like sort of struggled historically to get up in the morning. I would wake up in the morning and go, uh-oh, every time I open my eyes. But now, ever since I've landed in this new routine of exercise in the morning, which I used to do in the afternoon, and I've increased my exercise, as you know, that has given me like, I don't know how to put it into numbers, but let's say it's like 2 to 3 times more likely having an inspired day than before. Just by in rigorous exercise very early, close to waking up.
Yeah.
So tending to the body and to the immune system and detoxification systems and tending to those. It's amazing. Just we can't separate this mental experience from the physical experience. They're inseparable. They are in complete synergy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the Maslowian pyramid of self-actualization begins with chemistry and molecules and physiology and cellular balance and signaling that's pro-longevity and pro-relaxation, pro-balance. And these momentary events that stress us out need to be momentary events that we come back down from quickly. Otherwise, speaking for myself, I've lived, years of my life in the past where I was mostly in a stress response for a lot of different reasons. But it's feels amazing to see come into a clearing around that and a more balanced physiology. A big part of it for me, I think, just in the past few years has been my marriage and a different level of health in my attachment, my partnership attachment. Being with a person who is so committed to, one of our vows is abundant repair. So, whenever there's a rupture, which is inevitable in any relationship, we're just fully committed to complete and total repair. And we do that really well. So that's really changed my physiology for sure.
Let's expand out this whole piece of connection attachment. Before we do that, you when you were talking about this piece of chemistry and kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that it starts with chemistry in a certain way. And what I was reminded of was when I was really studying yoga in my 20s, the Yoga Sutras. Like, the yogis knew this, a very long time ago, that the path, at least in more of the movement-based yoga system, the path was you first cleanse the body for a long time in yoga. Movement postures, you're cleansing the nerve channels with diet and movement, and so you're actually, the whole first process toward which is considered more of a transcendent process over time was to start with the body. So that's kind of, I really like how you're saying it starts with chemistry, and we're trying to collapse the journey of the yogi into a day. Where it's like you get to actually experience the inspired state in the same day. And so, I think it's like, can you ascend into that inspired, elevated state every day to some degree? And I think that's what we're talking about, is it does start with the body on some, it does, right? We have to care for our body in order to gain access to sort of the riches of what's possible.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just like any practice. Like I feel like my perspective's really shifted around. It's about getting that muscle stronger every day, the muscle of inspiration, through working it out, through recommitting to the practices that set that chemical foundation, and then go into my psychology and all the things that can derail me from being in an inspired state. Fear, worry, disorganization in my day, not having things planned out. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think of I had a great teacher, Gestalt teacher, and when I was back in grad school, and he used to talk about the cycle and needs of the infant a lot, as food, touch, and movement. And you have to you have to keep resolving that cycle in a healthy way. Food, touch, and movement over and over and over, food, touch, and movement, in order to, give them the best opportunity to develop a healthy brain and a healthy being. So that doesn't go away, right? So we've talked about food and touch, and food and movement, and I think started talking about touch in a certain way. So I don't think of touch just as sensory touch. I also think of touch as intimacy and connecting with another human being as we keep getting older. And so let's go into touch a little bit. Let's go into intimacy and connection. You started going there. Maybe say a little more of what you were speaking to.
Yeah, thanks. It's fun to explore the ways that the physiology of a human system can respond to different interventions and try different things. And Krista and I are big fans of Stan Tatkin's work, and we learned from him about the comings and goings, like coming back into contact at the end of a workday, or one of us is coming back from a work trip or something like that. And that moment of reconnection is really rich. And so one of the practices that Stan Tatkin recommends that we've used a lot is embracing each other, hugging each other until you can feel the physiology of the other person settling. It usually happens with like a deep breath that happens spontaneously after, 15, 30, 60 seconds of a hug. It's really incredible to feel that shift in physiology. So that's one example. Another one I want to share quickly is that whenever we get into a snag, we get into an argument or, a disagreement, or we don't see each other in a moment. We've experimented a lot with cutting out the verbal attempts to resolve that rupture. And what we will do instead is interesting and fun is one of us, whoever notices that the other one's dysregulated, will point to the couch and say, let's go over there. And one of us will literally lie down on top of the other one and feel the weight of the body and the care and on the same team feeling, and just feel physiology re-regulate. And then we would talk and work through what happened, and doing that first rather than trying to talk through the activation in the amygdala feels way more efficient and more effective. So that's a fun one.
Nice. Yeah, my wife has definitely been the teacher for me. I've learned a lot from her in terms of how touch and connection is foundational to inspiration and wellness. And I'm thinking about when I first met. So I'm, as you know, I'm about 10 and a half years older than her. So I was 30. She had just turned 19, I think, when we met. And I thought I was her teacher for the first day.
It lasted a whole day.
There was like a day. Didn't even last a day. We were, there was some interaction, and I thought she was being silly, and I got all of my thing, and I was going to teach her about that, and then by the second day, we're walking somewhere, and she's sharing something, and I'm zoning out or whatever, triggered, and she's like, "I don't feel seen." And I'm like, and that was like it. Like from then on, I was like, okay, now I have to see people better, or see people. So she very quickly became probably the primary teacher around how to do connection in a healthier way than probably I had ever seen. So I think connection is, and I'm sure it goes both ways sometimes, but I think it's just, she definitely had more natural sense of how to do it. But connection has definitely been, and I don't just mean with her primary relationship, but connection has been a major part of inspiration, connection to our team, us, my wife, my child, my friends, my family, like just the more intimacy and connection I can rely on, it's so much easier to go into inspiration. And in fact, when I get in a big snag with Emma, inspiration is like, where did it go? It's gone, right? As soon as I'm like overwhelmed and some snag in myself, it's actually the opposite of inspiration.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't even be inspired as soon as I'm triggered with Emma. So to me, it's like a ground to come back to this open state of human connection and love and trust and security. It seems like it's another ground, another fuel for inspiration. And returning to that, like if you want to get back into inspiration, you got to get out of your argument and somehow fix it, because you got to figure a way through it.
Right.
Or else you're not getting back to inspiration. So I try and remind myself that when we get in a big snag and I'm like, well, how long do I really want to feel this way for? Because inspiration feels a lot better and connection feels a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's really painful to lose contact with inspiration and with, the people we care about. And, this reminds me of the other thing that I think is related to inspiration. That's a big part of my relationship at home with Krista, is supporting each other's full self-expression. And it's really hard for me. It has been, to give myself permission to express myself. I've got all kinds of excuses and reasons not to do that. And, the whole mantle of being a physician and having a medical license and being afraid of, reprisals for things I might say, or, it's a journey for me, self-expression. But what I'm realizing is that inspiration is really connected to self-expression. Like I can't fully feel inspired if I'm not really tackling self-expression.
Yeah. I mean, I think the freedom to express is the inspired state. And it's so key to be working through, a lot of obviously trauma can bury our expression. Although there's also the flip side of that, which is one of my early yoga mentors said, don't repress, but don't overexpress. And so, I think there's expression is probably the healthy medium in there, the middle ground of like being able to be in a flow state and let out our creative selves and be authentic. And I think that's a very inspired state. And then I think the two sides of the coin where we aren't in that is probably a kind of suppressed state, where our traumas and whatever else causes us to do that, or an overexpressed state, right? Where it's probably not even, the term expression is probably not even good there, but where there's no, it's a dissociative state, right? It's like we're not connected to self, and it's just like this outpouring of ourselves that we're not connected to our heart. And so I think expression is who we are. It's when we're connected to self. And I think in an inspired state, we are able to express. And I think practicing expression moves us into inspiration. It's what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, my background, for those of you who haven't heard us talk about yoga and meditation before, is really more of a deep dive into Tibetan Buddhism. And I felt like in my deepest years of practice there, I felt very connected to myself, but actually there was massive amounts of censorship going on with other. And it was a painful was a gradual and, kind of a long process. The headline is that meditation helped me get connected to myself, but meditation didn't help me with self-suppression in terms of expressing publicly, like having a feeling of confidence or comfort, expressing my opinions or my needs, asking for things from other people. So I also think, in addition to self-connection, for me, self-expression is the willingness to be seen and willingness to create something that falls flat on its face. And other people they don't care, or they judge it, or they don't like it. There's this kind of social component to it for me.
Yeah, I think that, related to expression, living an inspired life, living an inspired day, it takes courage, because you're not always going to, what you're expressing isn't always going to be, certain people will receive it as feeling hurt.
Right.
In some way versus feeling helped. Right. So it
Right.
takes the courage to just know that being in yourself and expressive of what's moving through you, that you can trust yourself enough that it's what needs to happen, whatever that expression is, whether it's words or whatever. Maybe you're giving a talk and you say something that moves through you and somebody doesn't like it. And so
Right.
I think there's sort of a fierce courage that I think is very generative in an inspired moment. In a highly inspired moment, you get the kind of fruits of that, which is feeling that courage and that confidence. And
Right. Yeah, the willingness to show up for yourself and stand in that, whatever that is, judgment, fear, crickets, nobody listening.
Right.
I made a commitment to myself to start practicing more of this. And social media, I haven't kind of dabbled in social media, but never really knew what I was doing or what the purpose was. And then I realized a couple of weeks ago that this is like a huge opportunity for me to show up for myself and just express what feels true to me in the moment, and let the chips fall. See, and so I started a Twitter account like 10 years ago and didn't do anything in it, and as of May 1st, just made a commitment to myself to tweet every day and just get in there and start doing it as a practice of self-expression. And it's interesting to see all the things that come up around that.
That's great. Well, why don't you tell, the thousands of people listening right now what your Twitter handle is, so you can practice with a lot of people watching you.
It's funny.
What's your handle?
Funny to notice what comes up when you invite that. So it's at Will Vanderveer. It's just my name, WILLVANDERVEER. So yeah, you can go see me making bad art in Twitter.
Right. At Will Vanderveer, expressing himself fully right now.
Yeah.
Go check his expression out. Cool. Yeah. Well, there's also, so I know we've got, we're going to have about 5 more minutes here. So I want to hit also values a little bit. I just think if we're going to be talking about inspiration, it's really important to bring up values as part of the conversation. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. So for me, values is also a practice. So values being the things that I believe are most important to me as a human being to fulfill in my life in a given day, since we're talking about the day right now. And values, I think behaving in our values is a practice, which I think that's not really talked about much in most spaces, that actually staying in our values, meaning behaving in our values, which is really staying in our values, is a real practice. It's very easy to do things that are important to other people and not ourselves. And I don't mean compromise. I just mean actually abandoning self, It's very easy to get kind of glazed over and not even know what's important to ourselves in a given moment. It's so easy to get into big addictive cycles where we're more, behaving out of seeking a lot of pleasure and not really out of seeking a lot of meaning. So I would say that a major part of the practice to get into inspired states is practicing behaving in our values.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even just doing the work of discovering what's most important to us, what our values are, is such an important kind of foundation, right? And for someone like me, it's been a big, that when I first discovered that work, that with DeMartini, the person that we've both studied with a lot, I really struggled with that because there was so much subordination or kind of living a life that I thought others needed me to be or wanted me to be. And so it's been a big leverage point for me in achieving inspiration and beginning to come out of the shell and self-express to do that work. It's not easy to even know what your values are.
Yeah, it's not easy to know what values are, or introjected values, right, of others that we picked up along the way of what we should be doing in the world.
Yeah.
But some of us, like myself, for me, the way I don't know my values is more the opposite, because I tended pretty early on to push against, I'm not going to do what anyone, like by kind of middle of college, I was like, or end of college, I should say, I was like, I'm making a commitment to like discover myself and my values. But there's still other issues of like knowing values, because even if you're like, I'm not doing other people's values, you still have to relax enough to find your own in that fight against getting out the introjects and that kind of that wrestling of getting those out. And there's this big, long process, I think, for a lot of people to relax into who they are. And it's a daily process, is what you're talking about. It's a daily process of being in self, being in relation to others that we have collaborative and cooperative, relationships with, and they have things that are important to them. And if we value other people, then sometimes the value is to follow their need and not our own in that moment in some way. And so it's a whole, complex thing. And at the end of the day, I think it's key to be able to get into an inspired space is to feel like your day was basically about who you are and what's important to you. And that's a radical thing to know that that's where self-worth comes from, right? Which is, I'm worthy because I have something to offer the world. That's inside of me, that's important to me. And it's kind of like putting the oxygen mask on first, is being connected to your own value system.
Totally. And also converting that inner set of priorities into action is what I hear you pointing toward too, is like, I don't know if it was Brene Brown or someone who said that, if you want self-worth, do worthy behaviors or something along those lines. Like you gain self-worth through action, not only by knowing who you are or what, but actually creating a life that's a reflection of that inner world,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's this sort of delicate path of getting every day, and then for some more than others, depending on where you're at right now in this moment in your life, like it might be the road to a higher level of optimization feels far away. Like it feels like, it's a lot of confusing, non-values based behavioral mishmash all day of, feeling like addictive cycles and all kinds of problems and not inspired. And the road at any on the spectrum to feeling like I'm totally inspired. I'm totally in control of my behaviors right now. They're totally pointed into meaning. Like that spectrum, we all fall somewhere on the spectrum at any given moment. And I think just recognizing that that's a human journey. It's a spiritual journey.
Sure.
And just recommitting to self and loving self in a moment to get back toward inspiration is I think the ultimate practice we could have.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like you start over every morning when you wake up, right? Whatever happened the day before doesn't count today. Like that's how it feels to me. Like I need to go do my practices, recommit. And, I might fall short, but then I can recommit the next day and deepen, day by day. And that commitment, that discipline and that consistency is what supports the development of freedom, really, in my world. It's ironic. Yeah. I used to think freedom was like, oh, I don't have any rules. I don't have to, I don't have to do anything today.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, I'm reminded of our friend. Remember Jeremy Geffen, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Our late friend, dear man. I'm just reminded of when I was in Colombia with him. I was having a horrible night. It was very challenging. He walked over to me and he said, "The sun will always rise again, and the day will be anew."
Wow.
And it's sooner than you think.
Beautiful.
So the sun will rise again, and we have another opportunity for a whole day tomorrow to get inspired. And I think we end there. It's inspiration's a practice. It's a daily practice.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks,
Good.
Will.
Thanks, Keith.